Kitty was right about you. You can't fix a thing.
Oh yeah? You want some chocolate?
In Merch Week, I've covered the weird, the terrible, and the funny. But I think it's time to be a little bit more serious. So for this episode, it's sponsored by my Superhero Alpha design, made by Dynamo Tune. It's such a cool design that blends into the shirt very nicely. So if you want to check it out, go to alphaj.show/merch and see all of the official Alpha J designs. Not all heroes wear capes. Some wear hoodies, and in this episode, some may wear just the collar. We see Courage sleeping while a mysterious masked fellow in all white comes up and beats the living mess out of him. To Muriel, she only sees it as horseplay, and she's so wholesome that I can't blame her for any of that. This is Kitty, and she's in a bad place right now, and we'll dive into why.
Dogs are evil.
Who?
This episode takes great liberty in supplying a lot of pain to Courage. Now as you'll see, Kitty is the one that supplies most of the pain to Courage, because she thinks all dogs are evil. Now if you were like me when I was younger, I thought all dogs were male and all cats were female. Cleverly in this episode, all cats portrayed in this episode, you know all one of them, are female, and all dogs portrayed in this episode are male. So it's heavily implied within this episode to explore the theme of misogyny. I do appreciate that later within the episode we get a well understood reason as to why she thinks all dogs are evil, not to mention what Courage would end up doing. It's also super clever that from this point on, Courage cannot help but see Kitty as a monster, because all Kitty has done is beat him up, which perpetuates the cycle of now Courage seeing cats as evil, and Kitty seeing dogs as evil. It's not your typical episode, that's for sure.
Bunny
Yes?
fell in love with a gangster. He treats her like she's his slave.
My kind of guy.
Eustace, that might have been okay, but Tumblr exists and that concept has an entirely new meaning now. Something I cannot and will not talk about here, or on my Discord. So as you can see, she explains that Bunny, a quote friend of hers, met a guy who treats her really bad. And after her attempt to try to break them up, she isn't allowed to see her anymore. When we see them later in the episode, the dog that she's referring to, Mad Dog, also has a crew of dogs, who unfortunately do as he bids. And they're also portrayed to be male. With all of this justification, you can see why she feels the need to not be around dogs, and can think that they're all evil. Can I also just mention that this episode takes music composition to the next level? Strings will always be a perfect family to have music that has this level of uncertainty to it. It sounds very dramatic, almost anxious, to further stress the point that this is not a laughing matter. What she is talking about has seriously affected her, even if Muriel and Eustace don't really have the context to fully sympathize with her.
I can't bear to face the truth that I'll never see her again.
Oh, such a pity.
Take that mask off, you might see better.
Every character in this scene is doing a different thing that I enjoy, so let's go around the room. Courage, being very naive, doesn't see Kitty as anything other than a monster. However, what this show does well is portray monsters, or villains, or antagonists, to have a reason to be a monster, a villain, or an antagonist, which for animation isn't always a given. We live in a medium where if a strong, mean guy wants to take over the world just because, that's okay. But Courage, the show, doesn't wish to follow that path. When you give villains a reason to be evil, you begin to understand why evil exists. You also begin to dislike the character even less, or more, than they are intended to. For me, it's less in this instance. Yes, she's crazy for beating up Courage, there's no way to argue around that, but her why is more compelling to me. At least more than a dog's pain, especially in season 4. Also, probably should mention, considering that Courage has negative experiences with cats before, it's also reasonable to assume that he feels the same way. Muriel sets off the B plot of the episode here, going back and forth with Eustace as usual. However here, rather than blowing off Eustace's actions as, oh that's just what Eustace does, and leave it at a surface level, they actually dive into the relational aspect. This episode knows when to do a deep dive into a topic, or on the other hand leave it at surface level for impact. Eustace is highlighted to be extremely grumpy in this episode, almost to a point where it becomes annoying to a viewer, intentionally. However, it's needed as Muriel's eventual need to talk to Eustace about his mood gives his extra crankiness more of an impact. Lastly, Kitty here is dressed in white and always wears a mask. To me, it's clear when she says she doesn't want to face reality, it's because her separation with her best friend, Bunny, has caused her to swear off all dogs, seeing them as a threat. Because of their bond, Kitty and Bunny bunnies, and then also Mad Dog's malicious behavior. To her, reminiscing about the days before this tragedy happened makes her feel pure, represented here as the color white. So when you combine her ignorance towards reality and need to feel pure, you have someone so radically misinformed, her only satisfaction comes from the extreme need to express her emotions in an equally malicious way that they were formed. Simply put, she was emotionally hit, so she wants to emotionally hit back.
Evil dogs.
Sorry.
Can I just say I love this first person view shot? It gives the mood all the creepiness in the world. But they stress to the audience that Kitty doesn't love dogs. However, I know that she doesn't truly mean that. I feel that when she beats up Courage, she sees Courage as Mad Dog and wants to do to Courage what she wishes she can do to Mad Dog. And there's a bullying metaphor somewhere in there. The side plot, however, revolves around Eustace taking the credit for fixing things he's clearly in no position to fix. In addition to his very sour mood towards everyone, his distaste for Kitty's mask causes a lot of exposing to occur. Unfortunately for the three of them, they aren't equipped to handle such extreme emotion. When Muriel wants to offer tons of hospitality and a warm bed, she also doesn't appear too emotionally intelligent to really get behind why Kitty is acting this way. That's not a knock to her because it isn't her problem, but unfortunately for her, it's Eustace who keeps bringing it up.
Eustace, do you think I eat too much?
No way, Muriel, you're perfect.
Nah, the masked lady. I can fix anything.
The fact that Kitty's presence makes her question her own eating habits is also a subtle thing that makes Kitty such a compelling character. She makes it clear that she doesn't want to face reality. However, we do get to see the well built up to face reveal. I love the music composition here, playing with the dynamics of the audio. Sometimes it's very quiet and other times, it's pretty much in your face. Now, one underrated part of this is that while it has a lot of elements within this that wouldn't be out of place in a drama, it retains a lot of elements that a wacky cartoon would do. I appreciate that even though this is a serious topic to discuss, the episode still has wacky sound effects for when Kitty beats up Courage, or for when Courage yells, and it's always a different wacky, shocked expression, or for when Courage would go on to explain this issue with Kitty, and he ends up turning into the monsters to further exaggerate her actions, or how in classic cartoon nature, Courage pulls keys from the magical pocket that holds everything a cartoon character needs. These aren't things that you're going to see in your typical live-action romance drama. That's also what makes this a great Courage the Cowardly Dog episode, because it doesn't forget where it's from. Speaking of keys, after seeing an already mysterious Kitty play with the mysterious cat toy, Courage locks her in her room, then locks Muriel and Eustace in their room for safety. However, not before we get Muriel saying,
Courage, what's wrong, dog?
which is amazing, but also doubles up as a running theme of people calling Courage what he is at the end of the day, a dog. In all seriousness though, she drops some gems.
All we know about this poor girl is she's from the wrong side of the tracks.
Unfortunately for her, she's right. Why unfortunate? Because in Courage's mind, his flawed perception of her would only flare up his bias, which while justified only causes the further push of the divide between dogs and cats in this episode. Even though it's pretty clear that this episode discusses the divide between two different sets of labels, it doesn't even need to be that extreme. Being mislabeled because of a genuine misunderstanding is not okay, and when you're perceived as a monster or just a bad person, there's not much you can do when your steps are also being wrongly mislabeled. I'm sure many people have gone through this, including myself. On a lighter note, I love how in Courage's mind he sees a grossly exaggerated version of Kitty eating Eustace, and him only being able to save them until after that happens. If there's one thing I didn't expect from Courage, it was shade. That was shade. So, let's talk tension. You'd think the times when he's afraid or nervous would just blend in as his usual being. However, this scene was nerve-wracking, and an already nerve-wracking episode. His shaking body, the music composition, and the consequences being very laid out made this such a tense scene. This episode wastes no scenes at all. Again, in that classic cartoon fashion, he uses a giant feather, again making this very dramatic and serious episode be laid upon a cartoonish foundation, without losing that punch that episodes like this have the potential to give.
You a friend of Kitty and Bunny?
You know, I'm gonna use this clip to explain to people how Robloxians die before they respawn. It's so fascinating to me how this is built up like an old domestic abuse drama. I find it super interesting that this guy knows. I feel like it's reasonable to say that if this guy knows, the whole town knows. And Mad Dog is with a crew that even if their malice is public, no one would ever step in the way of them. You also notice that he's a rat, completely neutral from both cats, dogs, and bunnies, which is a needed touch. You could make the argument that if Courage saw a cat in the diner and was initially afraid of them until he heard them out, and that is what makes Courage want to save Bunny, then it would have told maybe a slightly better story. However, that's like getting an A++. There's nothing significantly better than an A+. We get more back and forth between the more serious plot and the more comical plot, which is a very much needed thing to do, so it doesn't become too much of a drama-filled episode. When Courage gets to the place, the episode takes a lot of time setting the scene here, in a way that I can't do it justice. I truly mean it when I say that this episode, The Mask, does not spare a single scene. They spend a ton of time drilling the point home that this home is not the place for Bunny. It has tons of polluted areas around it, and I feel like the wooden fences surrounded by the barbed wire gives the place a very ugly and dangerous look. I also noted how some windows, even boarded up, give a very vibrant red hue to them. Also again, the music. You also notice how they never show the antagonist in the episode until now? Sometimes the greatest tool to showcase a villain's intimidation is their absence. He isn't shown until he needs to be shown. About 13 minutes deep into this 22-minute episode, they spend the first half building him up to be a vile, dangerous human being, and showing his effects on people like Kitty. Then they spend the latter half of the episode seeing if Courage can save the day. When Mad Dog shows up, we have a fake out with one of his henchmen getting out of the car, thinking that it's him. He assesses the area with his nose, justifying his need to be a dog. We also see Bunny in a very expensive outfit. And hear me out here, I feel like this has a few meanings. While we see Bunny in a very expensive outfit, Mad Dog is just in a tank top. Now maybe I wouldn't consider myself a dating expert, but something tells me he didn't take her on a very sweet and romantic bamboo dinner date. I do like how with the diner and leather jackets, it gives us a very old school feel. So the first meaning I would give this is that when I see her suited up towards the beginning and progressively wearing less and less until the end of the episode, it's because she's also not living in her bare reality, being forced to wear clothing or labels that she may not prefer. Also, when you look at her pearl necklace and her very expensive getup and the dead look on her face, she clearly looks like she could have a particular job where she's offered as a service. She's not horrified or even upset or mad, just kind of dead. She doesn't even look like she's living in the same reality that Courage or even Mad Dog is in. Likewise, she is also wearing a mask to not face her traumatic reality. We go back to Kitty realizing that she lost her toy, and with very good voice direction, she nails this scene.
Who stole it? It was that dog. They're all alike. They steal what you love the most.
She's not wrong, even if she's only seeing the picture from one side. Also, I bet this scene being very blue here to contrast the reds in the other scene was intentional, and that's good on them for seeing details like that. Alright, so this next scene is pretty uncomfortable. In fact, I'm gonna need a minute to fully prepare, so stand by, I'll be right back.
So for this episode, it's sponsored by my superhero Alpha design. Now that Alpha J is gone. Hi, I'm Alpha Jane of the Alpha Jane Show, and let's talk relationships again. The scene here portrays a very unstable relationship between Mad Dog and Bunny, and I want to separate it into 3 parts and discuss them thoroughly.
Come on, Bunny. Don't I make you happy no more? Or maybe you're still thinking about Kitty.
He starts off very nice and kind to give everyone who may be watching a false sense of security. You notice how, even when kind, Bunny seems very disinterested? This tells me that she's seen and heard a lot of this before, and knows that this is not his true self. Even though he wants to show himself as the right person for Bunny, by failing to take Bunny's side on the matter, he only comes across as stone evil, because he then begins to turn this on Bunny. He places the blame on Kitty, someone that Bunny holds near and dear, despite them being unfortunately separated. His animosity towards Kitty only serves to make Mad Dog even angrier, but also makes Bunny even more disinterested in the conversation.
I take you from a 2-bit joint and make you a class act, and you want to make me second rate? If I even smell Kitty, I'll bury the two of you.
He goes from trying to reason with Bunny to being angry very quickly. Remember, it's not just Mad Dog, but also his henchmen. This just goes to fuel the fire of his unstable behavior.
Oh, buddy, you know you're my girl. Let's go back to the way we was.
After intimidation, he goes back into trying to reason, because of his intense need to control her emotions. All of these 3 moments are what make him such a vile villain, because of his realistic portrayal of what an abuser may do. Even though this episode shows us a very distraught and aggressive Kitty beating up Courage in front of other people, the more serious abuse is shown behind closed doors, which is a step above other episodes that cover the topic. After a desperate attempt to escape, Kitty gets cornered by the other henchmen and placed into a flower pot to be flowered. This could mean many things, one of them being that they forced themselves on her. When you go back to her being given tons of jewelry, clothes, and Mad Dog saying that he took her from a 2-bit place, alongside the dead look in her eye, it's clear to see that they used her as an object and treated her well just to keep using her as an object. The fact that Kurt sees this all has to be traumatizing. This episode does a great job at portraying what domestic abuse can be like. There's more types, but this episode is only 22 minutes long. And it does a very good job. Shoot. I gotta go. See ya.
Alright, Wait, did you already... Whatever. Anyway, they go back to the B plot. Muriel finds a bobby pin, one she'd use to exit from being locked in the room. Eustace would take on more dramatic and cartoony measures to open the door.
What in the world are you doing, man?
Stand back, Muriel. I can't open the door any other way.
Try this.
Just a bobby pin. I could have thought of that.
And soft-spoken Eustace is both a mood and a treasure. I also appreciate how they show Kitty quickly, and have her leave the situation that Eustace and Muriel are in because she's much more needed in the A-plot. So the climax is also phenomenal. Mad Dog, being the villain that he is, throws his henchmen to do his dirty work, but Courage makes short work out of them. I also noticed the music picked up from being slow and droning to actually having a beat at this point. I love when the little things are looked at. The level of detail in this episode is incredible. You know what else I like? Courage shoos off Bunny to run alongside the tracks and catch up with the train, seeing as the conflict should end with them being on the right side of the tracks. Courage then waves his arms and makes no attempt to get out of the way of a speeding car. He was clearly going to take being ran over to give Bunny enough time to get on a train. That's what makes him a great character. Even though he was beaten and pigeonholed based off the mistakes of other dogs, he put his life on the line for someone he just met 10 minutes ago to basically show that it's not all dogs. His efforts would be useless at the moment because it's clear that Mad Dog wants Bunny. But Courage then goes on to make short work of Mad Dog. With Mad Dog out of the way, we get a very satisfying ending.
Kitty, that dog saved my life.
Not all dogs are bad. Now we can be best friends forever.
They repeat the rhetoric heard earlier, but with a positive change. Not all dogs are evil. It took one dog to start it, and it took one dog to end it. I also believe the train is just a symbol for being on the right side of history. Abusive relationships aren't built to last naturally, so the train just represents what happens, for the good or the bad in my eyes. Bunny also holds the toy over her and her quote friend's head, like a mistletoe. Muriel, in an effort to cut back on sweets, is seen eating a green apple, not a red apple. Again, a very positive color. As the episode ends with Eustace wearing the mask, a very funny way to show that he won't face reality, and that he has zero in handiness as a sim, and will most likely die from being electrocuted in a very terrible Sims 1 fashion. And that was The Mask. This was a roller coaster of emotions, and I'm just glad to have given it the coverage that it needs. I hope I gave the themes it expressed justice as well. Let me know in the comments down below. Not all heroes wear capes? If you want to see the other Courage review I've did so far, it's with Gem Reviews, click here. Or if you want to check out the last video I did in Merch Week, Big City Greens, click here. Special thanks to the patrons of July, and until next time, take care. Alpha out.